Hello readers, I'm the Avenger and today we're reviewing The United States of Atlantis, written by Harry Turtledove in 2008. So this is a sequel to Opening Atlantis and the second volume in the Atlantis Trilogy, and this covers the Atlantean War of Independence from Britain. And it spans 3 years, so from 1775 to 1778. And the point of departure in this series is that Atlantis, or the American East Coast, is its own island in the Atlantic. And the point of view character in this novel is Victor Radcliffe, who was the POV character in the third novella in the previous book. So the novel starts with Victor witnessing the start of the Atlantean rebellion, and the Atlanteans are angry at the English because they're taxing them, but they're not represented in the English parliament. So they rebel, and an Atlantean assembly is formed, and they pick Victor Radcliffe as general and commander-in-chief of the Atlantean army. And these soldiers are very individualistic, and in the beginning they don't even have uniforms or bayonets, but eventually they get green coats. And in the first battles between the Atlanteans and the British, the Atlanteans lose, but Victor Radcliffe makes the British pay dearly for these victories. And the Atlantean Assembly is proud of him for doing this and give him a sword in his honor. And he has some very ingenious ideas. This includes sending Thomas Paine to Terra Nova to stir up rebellion there, so that the British would be distracted in Atlantis. Victor Radcliffe uses some unconventional warfare. So for example, during the winter months, usually the war calmed down during this period in the 18th century, but in the middle of winter he decides to attack the forts in night, and he captures several of them. And his army is getting better as they're getting more experience, and to get better discipline they're being trained by Baron Stubben. And eventually the Atlantean Assembly declares independence in what they call the Atlantean Proclamation of Liberty. And they also decide to send an ambassador to France to recruit the French in the fight against the British. And eventually the French send over Marquis de Lafayette with an army. And Victor temporarily leaves his Atlantean army to be an advisor to the French troops to develop some unconventional war tactics. And he gets along well with Marquis de Lafayette. And here one night he gets drunk and sleeps with a slave woman, the mulatto. He's got his black friend Blaze along with him, and so he does the same thing. Victor gets the woman pregnant, and the way he gets informed of this is from some French slave owner who sends him letters. And eventually his son is born as a slave called Nicholas. So now he has a slave bastard. Eventually he returns to his army and commands his troops, and he has this bit eccentric officer who is called Habakkuk Bidiscombe, and sometimes Radcliffe goes along with Bidiscombe's eccentric tactics, sometimes he doesn't, and eventually Bidiscombe becomes fed up with Radcliffe not listening to him always, so he betrays them and goes over to the British. So kind of a Benedict Arnold in this parallel universe. And Radcliffe is furious and declares him a traitor, and all men who serve under him will be executed. Eventually Thomas Paine succeeds in stirring rebellion in Terra Nova, so the British have to go over there too to put down the rebellion, so they're spread thinner now in Atlantis. And Radcliffe starts winning more and more battles, and it ends with the siege of Croydon, where you have the British officer Cornwallis with his garrison, and they keep skirmishing. The Atlanteans have acquired bayonets now from killing the British, who were very good users of the bayonet and very brutal. And the British don't surrender, but then you have the French Navy who comes around, which has been gone for most part, and they start bombing Croydon. Soon Cornwallis decides to surrender, and they discuss the terms, and Victor Radcliffe wants Bidiscombe surrender to him to be later executed, but the British refuse. But they have a truce for 24 hours. Bidiscombe escapes in the middle of the night with his soldiers. The next morning the British surrender to the Atlanteans and the French, and they lay out a peace treaty which basically determines that the English are gonna leave Atlantis alone and recognize the United States of Atlantis. By the way, and Radcliffe and Cornwallis, although they're on opposite sides, they're kind of friends as they served together against the French in the previous war. So the French and the English leave Atlantis. Now Radcliffe focuses on capturing the Atlantean traitors who switch sides to the British. Eventually they capture Bidiscombe, and Radcliffe's soldiers want to kill him slowly but immediately. But Radcliffe refuses and says, we're gonna try him, and if he's found guilty he's gonna be hanged anyways. There's a trial, and Bidiscombe has his own defense lawyer, but Victor Radcliffe is brought in as a witness to basically state, yeah, he's a traitor, he betrayed me, he was a good officer on my side, but eventually switched sides and joined the British. So Bidiscombe is found guilty and he is hanged. Victor Radcliffe is no longer the general, and then Victor Radcliffe retires as a general and returns home, where his wife Meg is angry at him, as she also has received a letter showing that, oh, you got a slave pregnant and your child is born. She knows he cheated on her. And the same thing with Blaze's wife also. You have a slow reconciliation period between Victor and his wife Meg, and then later on, the Atlantean Assembly, which has been renamed the Atlantean Senate, has determined that they're gonna choose 2 councils who serve for periods of 2 years. And one of the councils is to be Victor Radcliffe. His wife Meg approves, so does Victor, and he is going to work from the new capital of Atlantis, New Hastings. And by the way, still in southern Atlantis, you have a Spanish settlement there. So most of Atlantis is now independent, but the southern part is still Spanish ruled. And that's the end of the story. So, how would I rate the United States of Atlantis? I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. This is yet another amazing read, and there are some more questions about slavery, as Victor Radcliffe's best friend is black and he's Blaze and he's a former slave, but he's a free man now. Blaze says repeatedly, it's ironic that you're fighting for freedom while in southern Atlantis you still have slavery. And you have a lot of northern Atlanteans who oppose slavery themselves, but they cannot do anything in southern Atlantis where slavery is legal. And this is further complicated with the fact now that Victor Radcliffe has a son who is black and a slave. You also see how in war you have the temptation to cheat and that you may enjoy the moment, but the consequence can be a bastard son. And if your wife finds out, she's furious. But apart from these things that makes this novel amazing, you also have some very fun warfare to read about. You get to see that Victor Radcliffe is a general who treats his soldiers well, and his soldiers like him personally, and that he has respect for the English respect him. You get to see kind of the difference between the Atlanteans and the French soldiers, and that you have a French general who appreciates the Atlantean Revolution. So I would say the United States of Atlantis is an amazing sequel to Opening Atlantis, even superior. I would definitely rank it in my top 10 books, right above Disclosure. I definitely recommend you to read this book. Read Opening Atlantis first, then read the United States of Atlantis. I'm excited to soon read Liberating Atlantis, the final book in the trilogy. Another amazing book, Harry Turtledove. This may be the best work I've read so far by Harry Turtledove. Truly excellent. And if you want to learn about another trilogy by Harry Turtledove, then I would recommend you to check out the Hot War trilogy, which is basically about the Cold War going hot during the Korean War and where you have nukes that are used. It's another great trilogy by Harry Turtledove, although not amazing as Atlantis. Anyways, I'm the Avid Reader, and I will see you readers next time.